Alrighty. Hey, Brandon. Thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm good, Mateo. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, of course. Want to quickly introduce you, Brandon Nixon, current CRO at Update Promise. You've been there about the past 9 years. How's that been?
It's been a journey. It's weird when you say 9 years though, because it doesn't feel like 9 years. But yeah, it's a long time, 10 years.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what Update Promise does. Any kind of pitch or just general overview you'd like to give the audience around what you guys do,
Yeah,
how you serve your customers.
yeah. We are a SaaS company for automotive, so we provide a full customer experience solution for car dealerships. And I always like the best way to explain it to somebody who's not in the industry is you bring your car into service. Our solution handles that complete experience, right? So from scheduling to checking you in, getting videos about your vehicle, keeping you updated, paying online. We take over that full consumer experience for a dealership so that our overall vision is that when customers bring their vehicle into a dealership that they don't feel like it's a horrible experience as it typically is. So we built, designed, and developed Update Promise from the ground to help to better that customer experience and get people excited about bringing their vehicle to a dealership instead of having to go to like a Jiffy Lube or Meineke, something like that. So been a journey from, like you said, 9 years ago to where we're at today.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure a lot of stuff has changed since the beginning, which we'll
Yeah.
definitely get into. And you mentioned customer experience being really important. Is that sort of the reason that sparked the company sort of becoming something you wanted to create? It was like, hey, we feel like experience for customers is just not good. Like, we want to solve this. Is that what started it?
Absolutely. I mean, the idea of the company actually, we're a family based company. We used to, as a family, we owned auto collision centers, right? And we struggled with customer experience for our own customers. So the idea of Update Promise was actually born out of our own collision center to improve our own customer experience. Originally, we started as a texting communication tool to just keep customers updated through automated AI status updates. That was where we began. And then it's evolved into a full customer experience platform. But it was solving the problem of customers complaining, going, hey, I don't know what's going on with my car. Can you tell me what's going on? And so that's where, hence the name Update Promise. We want to keep you updated on the promise you got when you dropped off, right? So that's where it all got born and raised. And we were doing our best to improve the industry and not have to stay in the body shop side of the business, right? So right now we're focused 100% solely on automotive service, which has been great. And yeah, it's cool to see how much of a imprint we've made on the industry since we actually launched.
Yeah, very exciting. So you mentioned things have changed quite a bit over the past few years, and 9 years is a long time. It seems like there's been a lot of different factors recently that have affected the auto industry. Off the top of my head, thinking maybe things like AI obviously is affecting every industry, potentially the recent tariffs and EVs as well, the adoption there. Are there any specific industry trends that you've seen that have really impacted your customers, the way you guys approach the market?
Absolutely. I mean, I've always said when it comes to automotive, the one thing that's consistent is change, and there's always going to be something that disrupts it. But I feel like that's with every business too. But yeah, like you said, EVs coming into the market. Before that, it was subscription models. And then after EVs, it turned into now today, the current activity is these tariffs, right? Which is dramatically affecting automotive. And whether you're for tariffs or not for tariffs, I will say, especially for our customers, when they start getting a bunch of unknowns of are their cars going to cost more money? Is it going to cut into their profit? They stop making decisions, right? And they start focusing on the wrong things. So trend right now for us has been, the margins on new car sales are slimming out so thin. Like dealers barely make any money off of a vehicle when they sell it, but they make tremendous amounts of money on the service side of the business, which is where our tool focus is. So it's been a great opportunity as of late for us because, that's where the dealers are starting to focus on their higher profit centers. But it has caused some chaos. I will say not until this probably the last like 30, 45 days have things started to kind of come back to normal and the unknowns are getting better. But it has definitely been a huge disruption. People will put this tariff activity right alongside, probably not as big of an impact, but alongside a similar disruption that COVID had when it came to automotive for sure.
Yeah, that's wild. It sounds like you guys are handling it well, though, in terms of how you're servicing your customers. If we think back to sort of the first version of the product, right? You mentioned the text message phases. How has the product evolved since it first started with the text message solution?
It's funny. We were just We just had an internal meeting regarding this because we were going over some new designs that we're putting out with our platform. And I brought up like original screenshots and workflows of what our tool looked like back in, 2010, 2011, and then what it looks like today. And it looks like a completely different solution. That's the one hard part being in the technology space, is that if you don't innovate, you die, right? So we constantly have to innovate, make changes. That's one of the biggest stresses we have with our company as well. Is like we want to do so much, but you only have so much bandwidth, right? And we're not a $1 billion company. We're a family based, smaller company, but we do big business, which is great. So it's just managing the innovation. But our tool, like you said, 9 years ago today, it's almost unrecognizable. But the core functions of what we do, of keeping customers informed and updated and helping that customer experience, is always there. It's just the functionality's become a lot more smoother. We've built in AI technology a lot more lately to really just make that customer experience and the usability of the platform a lot easier. That we went from being clunky to not so clunky to a much smoother experience now today.
Yeah, very nice. And like you mentioned, I think anybody who works at a software company has seen the change that the product will make. In just a couple of years, it can be unrecognizable for some companies, obviously.
Yep.
So that's very common. If you think about the changes that were made, how much of those decisions were balanced between where you guys felt like it needed to go based off market trends you're seeing, and then customer feedback and sort of using that as a guide to update and change the product?
I'd say it'd be 80% customer feedback and 20% us going, hey, we should do this, right? Or I would say early on, it was a lot of us, because of us trying to gain our customer base. It was a lot of us, selfishly and ignorantly thinking this is what the industry needs and this is what the industry wants, and then developing in a direction. That's where we made a lot of our mistakes. But I will say over the last probably 4 or 5 years, it's been majority just customer driven. We focus a lot on, and I'm sure you've seen in the industry, product led growth. We're a product led growth company of let's do everything we can to change, develop our platform based off what the customers want, so that we're not putting out. I can't tell you how many times in the past that we've spent months of development work building something, get it out into the market, and it just nobody uses it, right? It's like the worst feeling, and you lose so much money and time on it. So it's definitely been a better shift to prioritize based off of customer feedback.
Yeah, that's really helpful for, I think, listeners to hear and take into account with their own companies, and very standard from what I've heard and seen across the board too.
For sure.
So if we take a step back, obviously 9 years, you guys have gained quite a few customers over the time. If you think back to the beginning and your go-to-market motions and how you decided, let's find our first few customers. Can you remember how you approached that? What you guys did to get those first few?
Yeah, I mean, we were blessed. I think a lot of small companies don't have the opportunity we had, where, like I said, we had our own collision center. So we were able to be a test bed. And our main partner early on, he owned a car dealership. So he was able to be our first test bed. And then they were part of 20 groups, which then they were asking, hey, what are you doing that's causing your results to be different, right? That's how we understood that the market needed us, right? Is because we were able to make an impact on our own stores, which then spread the word to others. And they were going, how? What are you doing? How are you making this change? How are you accomplishing these things? And that made us, step back and go, okay, the industry needs it. Let's develop it. We've got the bandwidth to go and do this. It's going to take a lot of risk taking and diving in, spending a lot of money, but we think it'll pay off. And I'm glad we did. But I will say we did make some shifts along the way. Like COVID was a pivotal point in our company. I know so many companies didn't last through COVID, and thank God we did. But we were able to step back and focus on developing the platform while new customer growth wasn't there, And it's not that we were 100% stagnant. It was just nowhere near what we had projected and what we wanted. But it gave us the opportunity to focus on our relationships with our big partners, develop the platform, fix some things that we really needed to fix. So as much as COVID was a big damper on everybody, it was a opportunity for growth for us, for sure.
COVID unfortunately put a lot of companies out of business. And you just mentioned that, so some of that time gave you an opportunity to fix things that needed to be fixed. Can you think off the top of your head what some of those things were that needed to be fixed and you had the time to work on?
Yeah, I mean, product functionality items for sure. We also were able to develop internal processes that we were, because we were in such a quick growth mode. And that's definitely a mistake that I see that we had, is like we were just taking what came in and pumping out so fast, right? And there was oftentimes so many missteps internally within our company where there'd be a mistake here or there, and then we'd fix it along the way, right? So it allowed us, COVID, as things started to slow down with new customer acquisition, allow us to focus more on process, so that as customers came in, we had a much smoother process, a lot more SOPs documented. And product wise, there was a good portion of our tool that we needed to upgrade, right? Old technology that we developed back in 2009, 2010, that was still in there, causing a bunch of technical debt for us
Mhm.
that prevented us from innovating. And so we were able to tackle a lot of that technical debt because we weren't so much in that phase of the you know we need this new product because all these customers are asking for this new product. It was more, let's start fixing our stuff that we needed to upgrade in the back end so that the new products can start to come. And so it was a good transition point for us.
Yeah, very insightful, and that's a piece that I think most companies go through, which if you can remember when you were growing and you hit this point where you sort of redid your SOPs and started to rethink your processes, what areas do you feel like were in place that sort of broke as you guys grew and scaled that needed to be redone? And what were some of the things you guys implemented that helped, whether that was software, new
Yeah.
hires, things like that?
Implementation was by far the one area that we realized was hurting our retention. And part of it is we realized that first impressions mean everything, especially when somebody's paying for your product, right? When they first start getting your product into their company, they want to see it execute right away. And so we noticed there was a big gap in our implementation where we would go out on site, because we do all of our training on site at the dealerships, right? And there would be issues with Wi-Fi, there'd be issues with setup. So the first couple of days that our trainers would be there, we would be failing because we're fixing issues instead of training, right? And they're paying us to be there to train them to get the platform up and running. So one of the big changes that still today, I'd say it's one of the biggest influential changes that we had, was just our fixing our pre-implementation process. So we set up a full SOP process of like customer signs till the date that they launch. What do we need to accomplish ahead of time? And let's not just be vague about it. Let's be granular in the details so that day one, when my team's on site, they're training, they're not addressing issues or trying to pick up information. And one of the big things is our customers fail constantly at giving us the information we needed. And so we would constantly have to follow up with them, blah, blah, blah. So we set the expectation earlier. I got signed agreement, that sales rep saying, okay, here's our estimated launch date. Here's the milestones that are going to happen before we go. And here's where I need you to commit to get me these things, right? And so the more we set the expectation earlier, the better we were off, down the line. And we put what's called change management in place, which a lot of companies will call change management different things and they mean different things. But for us, it meant before I go out, I'm actually sending somebody to your store about 3 weeks before you launch to validate everything's set up and correctly. And if we wouldn't have put that in place, I think our retention rate would be in the tank. Once we put that in place, we were seeing a much better successful launch, which helped our retention over time a lot more.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I really want to understand some of the tools that you were using to document and help with the onboarding process. But before we do that, you mentioned that all your onboardings are on site. And I want to double click on that because I think some companies might be able to work completely remote and gain customers and do everything through Zoom and all that. But it sounds like you make it a big point to be on site, be in person with your customers through the training process and all that. How much do you think that has affected positively the relationship with your customer, the experience that they're having? And it sounds like you put an importance on that. What are your thoughts on it?
Absolutely. I mean, for relationship wise, it's next to none. I mean, companies nowadays, like you said, majority of companies can't afford to do what we're doing, right? I'd like to say we can't even afford to do what we're doing on that on-site, right? Because it cuts into profit, but we charge for it now, and the dealers see the value of us doing that, right? Our product's such a high touch product, and I'd like it to not be, but it's the reality of the industry. So it requires that on-site training because Change, I always say, is a 4-letter word. And when you're talking about change to a technician who's been turning wrenches for 20 years and now we're bringing in this new age software, if I tried to put that guy in a Zoom meeting and train him, no way. He wasn't going to use it. It'll never get off the ground. And I'll get a cancellation in a couple of weeks. But if I have got somebody who's physically there training him, who's done the role and the position, then yeah, we get adoption a lot quicker, right? We always said we take that Twitter effect. And there's a study out there that says, if I know it's now X, but if they can get a user on Twitter and that user tweets within the first couple days, has like 2 to 3 tweets within the first couple days, they're going to be, a person on Twitter for life, right? And that was our mentality. Like, if we can roll it out and they're using the platform, we can show them upsells within our platform the week of launch, then we're going to retain them for life. But if we just try to do everything virtually and we expect them to just hold themselves accountable in those first crucial stages, they're not going to stay on for much longer. And we saw it. So we had to make that change. It is a big investment, but now we've had to train our sales team of how they pitch the training, right? What's the value of it? Because they do compare us to our competitors and they're like, well, the upfronts are a lot more expensive or can be more expensive. And it's like, well, here's the value, right? How many times have you launched a platform in the past that you've gotten rid of? That's the reason you're in a meeting with me today, is because you're not having success with your existing platform.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we're going to change it, right? So it's a lot to do, but if you're able to do it and your pricing model and your platform supports it, customer relationship, they will stand by you and be huge referrals down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. Great points. And the Twitter example sparked something that I remember hearing a while back. There's a CRO, Mark Roberge, who was CRO of HubSpot. And I remember him talking about one of the ways that they were measuring sort of success with the adoption of the product was how many sort of modules that the customers were using, since HubSpot had things like CRM, marketing, all those different aspects of the product. And they really wanted to make it sticky by having the customer adopt additional modules. So when you're thinking of customer success and you think about sort of the metrics that are important for your product to be adopted in a successful way, what are some of the areas that you guys measure? Like, hey, this is a good use of the product. They seem to be really using it in a way that's going to increase retention.
Well, the HubSpot stuff is close. I was a early adopter of HubSpot. I implemented HubSpot into our company early on, and best decision I made for a long time. And I'm not trying to give HubSpot a plug. They've come a long way, and even when we first used it, it was crazy. But I always try to mirror what they do and what we do because they're such a great company. Their software is awesome. We use it. I use it daily. There's never not a day that I don't touch HubSpot. But as we went in, like you said, our KPIs that we measure, we have what we call as pillars of success. And that came out of our CEO. It's just, how can we get the main pillars of the process implemented at such a high level that they're going to want to continue to use the platform and see the value in it, right? Because we would see that they would utilize some portions of it because they loved this, but they wouldn't use this other portion. And it wasn't because it wasn't good. It just wasn't part of that process that was shown to them, or, they didn't instantly get the value right away. So they just stuck to what they know. So we changed our pay plan for our customer success specialist, where their pay plan is tied to those pillars of success. So if the account is using higher utilization in all the pillars, our customer success makes more money. So they're financially motivated to get the dealers to utilize more. And it's not costing the dealers more money to utilize this. It's just saying, use what you got, get the most value of what you're paying for. And then we have ancillary products that'll come down the line. But when we did that, we lost some customer success because they were like, well, you're messing with my pay plan, right? But we gave them opportunity to make more money by this process. And the ones who stuck on, they're making more money. And our dealers now are adopting the platform at like double the rate that we were seeing before since we put that process in. So I'm not just speaking it up. That was one of the big changes that helped us tremendously. And it got us big relationships, big OEM deals, because when we explain that, they're like, you're one of the only companies that is affecting pay plans by utilization. So like, you guys are financially tied to the performance of the store. I'm like, that's exactly what we want to do.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. It makes me wonder if we listened to that same podcast episode, because that was the first time I had heard a sales leader talk about comp being driven in a way where it's tied to metrics for the product. And it's interesting because I've been a sales rep at many companies, and we all understand in sales like comp drives behavior. I mean, it's a pretty just general thing, right? Like incentives drive human behavior. So it's interesting when you think about what makes your product successful. If you tie that being something that people want to focus on, having their customers use, it makes a lot of sense how it would make the customers happy. I know as long as the employees able to hit those targets, they'll be happy. But yeah, that's an awesome implementation you guys did.
There's two sides of that coin though too, right? I just made a video on it not too long ago because dealerships have the same problem where like the advisors are financially motivated by what they sell to the customers, right? So how can the customers trust that what they're recommending is truly what's needed because they're financially motivated, right? So there's two sides of that. You have to have a good balance of like, yeah, pay plans can drive execution from your team. Like that's very well known, but it's got to be based in the right areas so that the customers that they're servicing don't just feel like you're just trying to get them to do something so you make more money, but that you're really trying to help them out by utilizing more, right? So it is a balance, and some companies do it well, and some companies don't.
Yeah, great point. Great point. And at the end of the day, it sounds like you're doing it in a way where these are things that make a successful customer, right? Not just like a
Absolutely,
making our retention higher. It's like, hey, retention's higher because they're a successful customer because they're using these areas of the product.
absolutely, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I know you mentioned HubSpot was an area that you're using. Real quick, from a tech stack perspective, when we think back to some of the different implementations that you guys were using and how you were tracking that, are there any other helpful softwares that you were using that felt like they really impacted the business in a positive way?
Yeah, HubSpot transformed everything on a sales perspective. We went from, I mean, when I first started, it was just me. I was the only sales rep out there for our team, and I was running Excel sheets. And I remember we used this tool called Redmine. And I have no dig at Redmine because we did a lot in there, but it was more of like a technical tool. It was not meant for sales. And finally, when we got ourselves to a revenue level where I can go invest into our CRM, I chose HubSpot. And mainly I chose HubSpot because I could build it myself and not have to go hire for $100,000 a consultant to help build it. And now I know that there's a lot of people that do that for HubSpot. I always joke that like if something didn't work out here, I'd probably go do that because I know HubSpot like the back of my hand. But HubSpot was a big one. I'd say Jira for our tech development team. Touch Jira every single day, and it's just for us to manage our tickets. We use it for our help desk as well. It's the one thing I don't use out of HubSpot is we don't use their help desk ticketing. We use Jira for that just because my developers are in Jira. So if tickets are being made, I want them to utilize the ticketing system that they're managing their projects in, right? So that's why we have them inside of Jira. Slack has been huge. Biggest issue with any company is communication. And so we utilize Slack. I prefer Slack over Teams just because of functionality, usability, things like that. Teams is great. We use Teams today because we're a Microsoft organization, but we always come up quarterly going, do we get rid of Slack because we can use Teams? And everybody's like, no, don't get rid of it. We love it. It just keeps us all on the same page. So those are some key items. Any way that you can make sure communication stays in line, the better you're going to get rid of mistakes that happen along.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, well, let's move into a couple closing thoughts here. When you think about some of the bigger misconceptions people might have about building a company, any that come top of mind?
Misconceptions that you think you're going to have success right off the bat. You're going to fail 1,000 times before you start succeeding. I'd say too, like, from an outside perspective, when you start building a company and everybody's looking in at you starting to build that company, they think like, oh, wow, you're doing really big things. Like you own your own company. It's not easy. None of it's easy. It's probably one of the most stressful things out there. If you want something easy, go work for somebody else and just collect a paycheck, right? But if you want to grow, then do something on your own. And time, especially when you're building a company early, you got to find that balance between personal life and your work life. And it's very difficult when you're early on starting up because you're 24/7, right? Everything is about growing the business. When I was younger and left school to come work and grow this business, I missed out on a lot of being around my friends, doing all these things, but it paid off over the time. Now I've got bigger opportunities in front of me because I sacrificed so much. So don't be afraid to sacrifice, but still find that balance so you don't burn yourself out, right? That's one thing that's been difficult. And I'd say other misconceptions is that you can just, build a great product and it'll sell itself. It's not the fact. You gotta you have to, great products will sell themselves eventually, but early on, you really got to get the market to adopt and to really understand the value there. And you got to have the right people to do that. So invest in your people or else none of it'll work, right? If you don't invest into your people and you just think you can get, low level, entry level people to save money and it'll start executing, it's not the case. Invest in your people and everything else will follow.
Yeah, still got to put some sales behind that product led growth, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Cool. Well, lastly, what are you most proud of then? Sounds like you guys have done a lot there. You've done a lot personally.
I'd say one thing I'm most proud of is just where our company has come over the years, right? Like I said, I made some sacrifices personally to jump in, and I always had the vision of where we'd be at, that we would be one of the names that when people talk about fixed operations, automotive solutions, I wanted my company's name to be part of that conversation. And for so many years, it wasn't. There was like the top 3 or 4 solutions that would always get brought up. And what I'm most proud of right now is like, we're part of that, right? But I'd say the biggest accomplishment we've had and what keeps me going every day is when I speak with my customers, and my customers will tell me like, I just had back-to-back record months, right? Or new customers, we come in and they're like, back-to-back record months. We just hit, especially during times like this where everybody's expecting that like economy is not great. Customers aren't spending so much money on their vehicles anymore because they can't afford it. And then I've got my dealers having back-to-back great months because they're building trust with their customers. That's huge. What I've always said is I want my daughter to be excited when she grows up to bring her car to a dealership, which is a big ask because not a lot of people like to bring their cars to dealers to get service. And the only way that I can get that to happen is if I execute what I'm doing on the industry. So eventually, that's my long-term goal, is that I've changed the industry so much that she can feel comfortable bringing her car to service.
That's amazing. Well, thanks so much for joining, Brandon. Lastly, where can people find you if they want to learn more about yourself or Update Promise?
Yeah, no, updatepromise.com. You can learn more about there. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You'll see me, my videos, and my team on there. So always reach out. I'm always willing to help if people have got questions on, growing their business or questions on some mistakes I've made over the years and how they can avoid some of those. Always willing to help anywhere that we can. So, but Mateo, huge kudos to you with launching the company, and excited to see where you grow there too. And appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, Brandon. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, guys.
All opinions expressed by Mateo and his guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of their employer, employees, or affiliates. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions.